Celebration 125 and Beyond podcast. In 2013, Girl Number 85, that book was released. One of the reasons you did the book was because you wanted your children to know the story.
Absolutely correct. I wanted my children to understand why I was the way I was and am the way I am, and it was because of the treatment and the isolation that not just myself received in the residential school. I wanted them to understand what happened to their mother.
Yes.
That was the only reason I started writing the book.
You were a part of the Doukhobor community in BC, but also there's a link back to Saskatchewan, is there not?
My dad was raised in Kamsack, Kylemar area in Saskatchewan. His parents were independent farmers, and he came to Grand Forks to visit his aunt, his dad's sister, my grandfather's sister, and met my mom, fell in love, and never went back to Saskatchewan. And my mother was a Freedomite Doukhobor, which was interesting in all aspects, him being an independent.
Now, the Doukhobors, the roots go back to Russia, southern Russia?
All over Russia.
They were a pacifistic group, so that didn't sit well with the Tsar, is my understanding, back in the 1800s.
That's right. So the Doukhobors burnt their arms, and then they started immigrating. And I think 1899 was the year they came to Canada, but don't quote me because I'm not. I don't speak about the past and the Doukhobor history. I can tell you about my experiences in residential school, in the Doukhobor trek. Let's just say I still keep in touch with my friends, so I know what's happening in the Kootenays and in Vancouver, for example, regarding Doukhobors. But to speak about what happened to all the Doukhobors, no, I can't do that.
I understand. So you were living in Grand Forks for a time, right?
Yes, I lived in Grand Forks from the age of 2, I think, till 8, at which time I was removed and put into residential school.
And that removal was in 1955, and you were there...
Almost 4 years, from December of 1955 to August of 1959.
My goodness.
A long time.
Yes.
Well, I do talks, and I tell people we saw our parents for 2 hours a month, 1 hour visiting, and then like 2 Sundays a month we were allowed visits. So 2 hours a month times 12 is what, 24?
Yeah.
And then you start figuring that how long, 100 hours or something in 4 years. Unbelievable.
Were those meetings with your parents, were they not outside and also through a chain link fence?
Correct. The chain link fence came up, I can't remember, maybe a year after I was there. The boys were paid $1 a hole. So they had to dig because the fence was 8 feet tall, chain link, and they got paid $1 a hole. And when the fence went up, our parents were allowed to come into the enclosure, but they were required to sign letter or some official statement. And they refused to do that because where does it say that you have to sign some government paper to see your own child? So we visited them on one side, us on the other.
It would be an understatement to say this was a very emotional experience for you.
It was horrible. There's people to this day, our group that was in there, there's divorce is rampant, alcoholism, drug abuse. Our children, I'm not sure how we raised our children, that they have, most of them, I would say 99% of them, have become good Canadian citizens with the background that we were raised with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always amazed when I look around at the children of residential school survivors, the Freedomite kids, and how well our children and our grandchildren are doing. They're in society. They're wonderful, hardworking young people.
Now, in the Doukhobor community, the Sons of Freedom group was a separate group from the rest, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We were called domestic terrorists. I'm not sure where the division started, but I was told that my great-grandfather, Nicholas Zebrath, was the first Freedomite. He didn't agree with what all the other Doukhobors were doing, and so they broke away.
Mm-hmm.
I guess would be a good way to describe it. I don't have any of the history from my side of the family. This is just something that was mentioned to me years ago when I wasn't really interested in what happened when. So I don't have any information other than I was told he was the first Freedomite Doukhobor. There was the Freedomites, there was the Orthodox, the Independents. Then the Freedomites became the Reformed after all the bombing and burnings have stopped. And today I couldn't tell you if there's even any Reformed Doukhobors.
You had 3 sisters. Were they with you at New Denver or not?
Thank the good Lord, no. You had to be 8 in order to be removed from home. However, there were a couple of kids there that were 6 when they were removed. But then they were sent back home, from what I understand. That was before my time. And I was 8, and then my sister Catherine, who has since passed, was 6, and my sister Marie was 4. And then Nina, the youngest, wasn't born till I came home in 1959. I prayed every night that my sisters would not get caught and brought to this place.
Mm-hmm. And your prayers in that regard were answered.
Absolutely, they were answered.
Yes, yes. And so, just to put it in a nutshell, the government of the day, the federal government, the provincial, or both, wanted the Doukhobor community to have similar or same education as everyone else in the province was getting. The Doukhobor group, or the Freedomites anyway, did not want that. Is that right?
From my understanding, and there may be a different story, but I was always told all the Doukhobors, the Independents, the Freedomites, the Orthodox, all wanted a little bit of Russian taught in the schools, maybe 1 hour a week, and the government said no. So all 3 factions said, let's go on strike, because like in Grand Forks, for example, there's a lot of Doukhobor kids in the school. In Nelson, in Castlegar, in those areas. So the day came for the strike, and apparently only the Freedomites kept the kids out of school, and the rest sent them. So the strike was a failure, and then the Freedomites kept the kids, and then the government stepped in and said, you know, this is nonsense, kids need an education, and started removing us from home.
Okay.
And that's the story that was told to me.
Later on, this doesn't specifically, as I understand it, relate directly to you, but there was, of course, an involvement in the Agassiz area with the Freedomites, correct?
Well, the Doukhobor Trek came here because Mountain Prison was built to house the domestic terrorists, the Freedomites.
Yes.
And so families that had people in prison, we had nobody here in the prison system, but I think there was 1,100 people decided to do this trek from the Kootenays and the different places we stopped, and then Vancouver, and then we came to Agassiz and set up camp. We arrived here, oh my goodness, I think it was the summer of 1963, and it was disbanded in 1972.
As a point of reference for anyone who isn't quite sure, we know where the prison is, most of us in the District of Kent, but the actual community was living along Cemetery Road where the Agassiz Speedway is today, correct?
Not up on the hill. We were on the road that you drive on. If you just keep going, you end up at Mountain Prison. We were on the flats. It was an old gravel pit.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there was nobody that was up on top of the hill. Although going up around the corner to go to the cemetery, the women used to stand in the brush there, and they devised a way of conversing with their loved ones that were behind the fence in Mountain, and they would wave their scarves with the letters. So it's hard to describe. I'd have to show you. Like if you wanted to say "da," you start with the T, and then the small H. You would print it backwards, so that the one that was watching you, it made sense to them.
Yes.
Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Yeah, like the word ambulance is spelled backwards, so we can read it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm very sorry you had to go through that experience from 55 to 59. When you did come back home, can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, it was like entering another world. I can remember saying to my mom, "Is it okay if I have a banana?" And she'd look at me and she'd say, "Why are you asking?" Well, because we had to. You know, I mean, you couldn't just walk in the kitchen in the residential school and take a cookie. You would be punished for that if you could get into the kitchen to begin with. And at home, it was just this freedom, but it was a small world because I'm used to living in a dorm with 8 beds and plenty of room, and here we are in this teeny-weeny, it seemed to me, this teeny-weeny little house, 4 kids and 2 adults, and it was everything about home was not like at home that I remembered. Everything had changed.
You made a comment a number of years ago that here you were there nearly 4 years in this residential school setup, but you knew of some girls who were only there a couple of months and they were already traumatized.
Yes, my very good friend says to me, whenever this subject of New Denver comes up, she said, "I don't know how you survived. I was only there for 3 months," and like she doesn't want to remember. She remembers very, very, very little about what happened there. I guess she doesn't want to remember. And she was so traumatized. She says even talking about it now makes her very, very sad and just can't understand how anybody that was there that long. Now, there was a boy there, I think he was there 6 years. Justify taking 6 years away from a child.
No, that's terrible. It took a lot of courage for you to write this book, Girl Number 85. When it was completed, were you satisfied? Like, was there a bit of a release for you?
Absolutely. It was a release the day I started taking notes, and that was many, many years ago. And I just kept adding and adding and adding to the notes. And I go to the Kootenays. I haven't gone because of COVID, but I normally go once a year and spend 3 or 4 days with my best friend in the world, Girl Number 58 in the book. I go to see her all the time.
You were saying how you and your sisters got into, what can we say here? Not normal isn't the word, but you fit in with the society in the Agassiz area, and you did not follow that path of resistance, if you will. All 4 of you married and so on in this area?
All 4 married. We all married non-Doukhobors. 3 oldest ones married local boys here, and then the youngest one married a fellow from Vancouver. Yeah, we lived what we considered a normal life, you know. We had a fridge in the house and indoor plumbing, and when our children came, we sent them to school, and we didn't think anything about protesting or, you know, if I see something that I think might be wrong, certainly I will put in my 2 cents, but I'm not about to start raising hell over something that can be settled in a nice manner.
Well, thank you, Helen. It's a fascinating story. Is there any area you can think of that you haven't touched on that you would like to mention?
Well, I might mention that as we're speaking, I'm working with a producer who has an idea to develop a 6-part miniseries, and he's based on my book. And he's working on that now, trying to put together. And if that doesn't go, then perhaps do a movie. And this has been, about a year or so now. They're trying to put stuff together and then pitch deck, I think, or deck pitch or something they call it. And we'll see where that goes. We do talks, Rotary Club, Salvation Army, just rest homes talk about my book. People are absolutely amazed that this happened in Canada, and my talking is the first time they hear about it.
Yes. That's one of the blessings of your book, is that it educates, makes us aware of what did happen.
Yeah, well, I hope people that have read the book said it's well written. One lady, about a week after the book launch, came up to me in Agassiz here, and she cried and cried and cried, and she said, you know what? She said, it's my story, and you told it so well. And she says, I couldn't sleep for 3 nights after she read the book. And this is a girl that lives here in town that was also in residential school. You know, and that seems to be the common thread. People say, wow, you've told my story. Well, it was our story. I just happened to be the one that put it down on paper.
Yes. And the Agassiz Harrison Museum, of course, has a section on the Doukhobor community as well.
One year, we helped put it together, and it was about when the Freedomite Doukhobors were here at the gravel pit. We gathered a whole bunch of stuff, you know, the traditional dress, just a whole bunch of stuff that we helped the museum put out on display, and it went over really, really well.
Thank you very much, Helen, for your time today. It's a fascinating story. We are all sorry you went through that, but we're glad you could share it with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.